to Thrive Radio. I'm your host, Amy Montgomery, entrepreneur and digital marketing agency owner. Today, my guest is Jack Flaherty. He is an esteemed thought leader and author in the realm of decision-making and leadership, with a rich background spanning from executive consulting to strategic advising for Fortune 500 companies. Jack brings a wealth of experience and insights to the table. He's pioneering work on developing frameworks for confident and informed decision-making, empowering countless individuals and organizations to navigate the complexities of today's rapidly evolving business landscape. Join us as we delve into Jack's expertise and uncover invaluable strategies for success in the ever-changing world. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Yeah, I'm
Appreciate
excited.
you having me, Amy. No better way to celebrate the end of a week.
Yes, definitely. So can we start with you sharing a little bit about what inspired you to transition from your previous roles to executive consulting and strategic advising to becoming a coach and thought leader in decision-making and leadership development?
Absolutely. I'd love to. So my background was investment banking, and I moved to the West Coast. In the process, finding myself in the world of risk management. One of the reasons why that attracted to me was the people. How to help people. Because whether on an individual basis or business, it's just the ability to encourage others to do better is just within my core. And so throughout the world of risk management, though, is your role is to identify the flaws of an organization. And it's a positive thing. If you think about your doctor and your annual exam. Now, in the process, what I identified often is that we would find these flaws, but because of objectivity, we couldn't give them the specific direction as to really how to fix those needs. And where I started to apply my thinking to my teams, but also reshifting how I work with my clients, was I started asking, what's the next question? So if you have a client that's got a flaw, are there any reasons that are pushing for that? So if a project failed or they may have an issue with their operations, take the next step. Was there lack of funding? Was there lack of executive support? Was there issues with the vendor or amongst their team? And by starting to identify that second layer question, you can at least help provide them direction as to what may be driving that particular issue that could be a blind spot to them. And as I transitioned throughout my career, I started looking more and more about solutions. How do we make these businesses, these processes, these industries better? So whether it be healthcare and providing population health, so you can help a greater amount of people, or whether it be financial services, how we do things more efficiently. What are different ways that we can think about the issues or how businesses are managed, organized, and executed so they could do so better? And I made the leap into writing a book about decision-making, is having a long think, for better words, during that time of COVID. And realizing that so many of the issues, so many of the limitations that we put on ourselves, our companies, and why we don't accomplish our goals come down to just poor decisions, ones that we might make that are misinformed. And actually, one of the most critical things that I've found with whether myself, individuals, organizations, is we start focusing on, for better words, false stars. We lose sight of what our true goal is and what we want to really accomplish. Yeah. And so that's why a core point of my framework is to make sure that you've got a very clear distilled vision of what you want to accomplish. And that way, all of your subsequent decisions follow that goal. And when applying those to clients or various projects, it helps keep everyone focused on that and just drives much greater results.
So can you elaborate a little bit on the importance of providing solutions versus just pointing out the flaws, and especially in the context of decision-making with professional service firms?
Absolutely. So breaking it down, I think it's necessary from a self-awareness or from an outside consultant's perspective is to point out flaws has got a very negative connotation, but for better words, issues, reasons why we're not accomplishing something. And a lot of times it really is. It's a blind spot, or you just do the same repetitive action because that's what your predecessor, whoever taught you how to do something, suggested you do that. And so having that outside of the box thinking about there's issues in how you're going about that and you're acting upon that is a really valuable resource. Mm-hmm. But when you flip that over to the solutioning side of things, is by providing options. How do we reassess that issue or your potential need? And what are different variations or solutions that could help them? And the one thing that when I provide a suggestion, I do so as a suggestion, is a almost a form of inquiry. Is that have you thought about this? And the reason being is when we think about solutions, we need to own those. Because if someone gives you a good idea, whether it be to lose weight, how to make more money, whatever idea that you have, if you're not bought in, you're much less likely to follow through on those actions.
Yeah.
And so having an inquiry based approach of suggesting, having them provide ideas to help shape that thought provides a better solution that everybody's bought in on. And you have a much better chance of accomplishing that goal.
Yeah, I like that. And in firms that you and I both know that sometimes people are afraid to make the decisions because when the cookie crumbles, the person that made the decision, that's where all the fingers point, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't delve too far into the professional side of professional services side of things because it's an industry that's constantly evolving right now,
Yeah.
trying to stay, one step ahead of their clients because they want to provide that value.
Yeah.
But they themselves are having to reinvent themselves. Because if you think about it, how much of the work that was done manually 20, 30 years ago is now being automated?
Yeah.
And this doesn't just change the service that you can provide, but this has impacts on the organizational structure. This has impacts on your fees. This has impacts on virtually every aspect of the organization. And so we need to take a step back and think about what the implications of those are. So those aren't flaws per se, but they're challenges, they're needs. And as we develop those solutions, we got to think about what the repercussions are on individuals or how we manage clients. And that's why that's so important to, particularly from a professional services firm, is to have a very dynamic lens and being able to shift and work together as an organization collaboratively to build the best solution, the best client service model that you can, because that's really what's going to differentiate you in years to come.
So prior to the podcast, we talked a little bit about how organizations sometimes fail individuals in achieving their goals. Can you share a little bit of your insight on how individuals can navigate that and overcome any barriers to their success?
It's such an important aspect of my framework, my belief is that myself, and there's been many times where situations you could see the problem, but you didn't have the influence or maybe the information to really affect, what the optimal decision was or the outcome. So I wrote a specific chapter or principle about a champion. And this is about working with others, and particularly those that have obviously a higher level of seniority when we talk about a champion. And by bringing in those individuals and helping them understand not just what my needs are, but what are the broader implications of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you can bring them along and help them understand why this is not in a sense, a selfish request, but why this is a holistic, better idea, you can gain support. So when you have that next meeting, when there is that next big decision, you have influential individuals that can help push that forward. And then you look at the teams that you build around you. These are the folks that are actually executing on your work. And so often, I'd be working, for better words, I don't want to say in isolation, but in individual pods at my clients. And so by making sure that the teams were all very clear and focused on what their goal, what their objective was, help make sure that they were driving towards success. And then when dealing with the executive management above, when we delivered upon the results, and obviously we didn't do it with surprise, I mean, we informed them ahead of time if we had made adjustments or shifts. So you get those below you and you get the ground level support, but you also let those that are in power, have that information that can also support and help you navigate through those challenging times is the complement, which really helps you when you feel trapped because you don't think you really have the power or the ability to navigate out of a pain point or a challenge.
So, what strategies or frameworks do you use to help, or that you recommend even to help make those effective decisions? Do you have a
Sure.
certain process that you follow?
There's a couple of aspects. One is you start looking at organizational structure and communication. And I'm a big believer in tone at the top, in really empowering the entire team to have a voice. And because when you give everyone within the team a voice to speak, you have a better opportunity to identify what a problem is or what an issue is. It helps their confidence. It helps improve their skill set and their ability to contribute towards the team. And so before Scrum became such this beacon of light about how to make rapid, quick decisions, a lot of times when we were underneath significant stress or change or chaos, I would have daily stand up meetings where it wasn't me coming in and saying to the team, this is what we're going to do today. It was presenting, here's the challenges. Based on experience, here are some options that we can look at to resolve those. But since in many cases, yes, I was the leader of a team, but it was my team that was having the direct interface with my clients. And so while yes, I may have a confidence that I know what to do, they're the ones that have that touch with all the individuals within a client or a situation that can provide you that real-time feedback. And by having an open discussion that obviously has to have structure, or else you're not going to get to your end result or suggestion, it
Yeah.
was a helpful tool to have a daily stand-up, but do so in an organized manner that gave voices to the individuals, but all with the objective of achieving a particular goal. And in this case, it might have been bad feedback from a client or a significant project that we need to accomplish. It was everyone contributing towards that goal, creating a very clear plan, and then we execute towards that plan. And it's very similar in many cases to Scrum because it's fail quick and let's keep going and fix things. This predated that, but it has a lot of those same elements of being agile and navigating that complexity with speed.
Yeah. I like that. It makes me think of a process that I utilize in my own sort of in the marketing space, where I will not tell people, I won't give them recommendations as far as this is what you must do to get an ROI. I'll tell them the stats and things, but it's here's all the ideas. And then I almost test people to see what they're open to. Because back to the thing that you said, if people aren't open to going down that path and not open to the idea, there's nothing you can do to convince them. And what's funny is there's some people that will look at one strategy and think it's the strategy they need to follow that they're going to succeed in their business with. Another person, for example, I had somebody that just lost it. He started screaming because that same idea that this business owner said it was the best thing they'd ever seen, this one was pissed off about it. And it's interesting how different personalities and even our own viewpoints on things. And so I can imagine in a group setting like that, anything that's going to limit the team would come to the top. Any limiting beliefs that the team has, anyone on the team that's not full on board with the decisions, and you're going to almost be able to, I would assume, navigate that ahead of time and get rid of deal with it ahead of time, so that you're not a month down the line and this person over here is still the one that's holding everything up, right?
Yes. And for so many reasons, I support that. For one, going back to the structure that I built, I manage a number of different clients. And so I'm not there on a day-to-day basis. So how am I really going to be fully informed if I'm not listening? And as we look at the generational change that has happened over the past, say, 10 years, a lot of the motivation that this next generation has is that feeling of buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we can have a very dogma approach where this is the military type of approach that we're going to take towards making decisions. But if you want to retain your people, if you want to be innovative, chances are it's going to be the folks amongst your team that are going to come to you with a great idea that they had seen maybe on a TikTok or a Twitter or YouTube or whatever. And that's how we are coming up with a lot of these great new innovative ideas. Is somebody is just they're not so wedded to tradition And that they're able to marry together what would seem to be two different ideas completely, but create something of genius.
Yeah.
And I think where if we can come together like that, it's amazing. And I'll just do a quick sidebar. I've made a number of mentions to him, but there was an amazing CEO that I'd worked for, a guy by the name of Barry Wolfman, and he would bring an idea in often. And the CEO, so highly respected, but he would bring an idea in, say, "Yeah, I have this idea. This is a need we have, and, but I think it can be improved." And so he opened himself right there for vulnerability, saying, "I don't have the incomplete idea." And by allowing others to freely give their feedback, you get their buy-in, their support, but you also get a better solution. And with the speed and with which, again, today's business is happening, we have to be much more agile and allow ourselves to be a little bit more vulnerable to open ourselves up for suggestions, or else we might get stuck.
Yeah. I love that. So how do you envision the firm of the future?
The firm of the future, the firm of the future is going to be a very different organization. And the reason for this is I'd mentioned before about technology and the adoption of whether it be automation or AI. So if you think about a lot of the manual functions that whether you're one of the big four consulting firms or you're somewhere in a niche boutique area, these technologies have flattened the playing field when you were trying to bid against a project because of size. Because now with technology, we can scale very quickly.
Yeah.
And the firms of the future are going to have to be much more niche, focusing on specialties, because it's no longer just heavy lifting. It's going to be looking at whether it be laws, regulations, technologies, how to innovate. And that's going to be the value that you're going to truly provide. You're actually seeing a lot of these firms get very niche into what would have been overlooked industries. And I think whether it be, I've seen whether it be the wine industry or various other much more niche industries that you probably wouldn't have had a specialist, is now taking a much closer look at that. And by having that much more informed approach, since all the manual stuff is automated, it's by being able to provide that really strategic advice that's going to be very compelling and allow them to differentiate themselves. But the second part of this is it's a trend that I've actually seen having had conversations with numerous executives from a number of different professional services firms, is that a lot of the skills that you would typically have thought of a consultant, that person going out and schmoozing over dinner or being able to pick up the phone and call anybody with confidence, a lot of those skills we regressed. And so there's a number of executives that are out there that, yes, they can do the work, but can they actually build the business? And this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue because folks are not as familiar about going to maybe a conference or having a dinner randomly with an individual because, again, post-COVID, these are not a lot of the activities that folks are engaging as much with these days.
Yeah.
And so I think the firms of the future are going to be those that are going to have to unlock whatever's holding individuals back from having that cavalier attitude. And cavalier in a very bold, positive sense, and meaning that they're willing to put themselves out there. And maybe not perfect, but being real, authentic, and just being there for the clients and just being real is really can what put you in that trusted advisor position, because you know what you're good at.
Yeah.
You know what you probably got a good idea about, but you also start realizing what's not in your lane as well.
Yeah.
And being able to have that specificity and providing that feedback, I think is really going to be the catalysts for the smaller firms that are going to leap up, but also those that may wind up slowing down and losing market traction, market size.
So the next question I have for you, I've been talking to a lot of people about this because it is something that is really needed right now, and especially in the online space, people forget this. Can you discuss the role of relationship and business development in shaping success of professional service firms and how leaders can effectively and meaningfully make connections in the landscape that we're in right now?
Absolutely. And this is carrying on from my last responses. is all about business development and relationship development. One of my other core beliefs is empathy and trying to understand another individual's position. Whether you were doing this from an altruistic perspective of I'm trying to help somebody out for free, or if you're in a sales position, or you've got a colleague that's in need, it's not always a need-based. Those that are having a successful run, we need to support that. And to do so, it is by putting ourselves into their shoes. So if you've got a rock star that's going to the moon, you have to realize that they're probably putting themselves out on a limb. How do you support them? And that goes whether for your colleagues, your clients, your partners out in the marketplace. And so as we talk about relationship development, this all about me attitude is, I think, where people, falter often.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about another's position, what pressures, what stresses that they're feeling right now, it's just a natural instinct, at least to me, is when I'm looking at you or I'm thinking about your audience and their needs, my first reaction is, how do I help? How do I bridge? How do I find some level of commonality with them? And that then just catapults us into a conversation, because then I start asking questions about you. And then generally speaking, vice versa, it comes back. And that's really where you build up that relationship. And when you build the relationship, you build the trust. And when we talk about commerce, selling, those types of things, at least for whether it be consulting, selling high dollar projects, it's trust. It's not the transactional stuff that you buy off of, whether it be TikTok or any of these platforms where you're buying a $20 dress.
Yeah.
You got to have trust. And in a world where we're so much more remote, you need to take that additional step. It's no longer 50-50. Envision yourself giving 70% of the relationship, because chances are it's still only going to be 50%. But you're going to show that you're trying. And that just is what really is the glue that binds a relationship and builds that trust.
Yeah. I love that. Especially on LinkedIn. We get all these messages on LinkedIn. Hey, book a call. Hey, so the first message is a sales message. And so many people don't get that. They don't understand that they could be so much farther along if they actually just cared about the people that they were messaging.
Absolutely.
They can message less people and have an impact, right? So yeah, it is really amazing how so many, and I think the younger generations too, have a hard time understanding the relationship building, because they're more online. They've had less of that old school of building relationships for 8 years before it actually turns into anything, right?
It's transaction. Some of it is transaction. You write a quick blurb on, to your point, LinkedIn, that hits an emotional nerve, and you click buy. But if you think about building your career, selling, like I said, a high dollar item, there's a steps in the process to gain that trust. Because if you don't have the trust, then somebody's not going to make that leap with you.
Yeah.
And as we think about decision making and being empathetic to someone's needs and really asking them, what are their goals or objectives? How can I help you get where you need to be? And so much, you foster so much more of a richer relationship and the long-term benefits by offering, how can you help?
Yeah.
And it's just something that I just pound into the table of, first, it's expand the network. Then you develop the relationships, you build the trust by offering how you can help. And if you're fortunate enough, that then translates into your business, your commerce, and making obviously additional revenue or money.
Yeah, definitely. So how can organizations ensure that they're clear on their business landscape to make informed decisions and start to effectively respond to things around innovation? We've got all the AI and ESG and sustainability.
So much packed into one question. I'll do my best to break it down. A very clear mission or goal. And I love this one example. I had a client of mine, they're a not-for-profit insurance company, exclusively dealing with the elderly population. High cost, budget conscious. And so for them to compete with your national providers that also had young folks like you, myself, and folks even younger to, to counterbalance those costs, they realized that they were vulnerable. And so one of their clear goals that they set for themselves was every time they looked at a project or making a purchasing decision of sizable value, they would ask, is a dollar spent on this project more valuable to our members than just giving it back to them? And it's such a simple concept, but if every purchasing decision ran through a filter like that, it serves to align everyone's thinking of member first, how do we benefit them? And so what I share with my clients in my talks is when you define your goal, make sure it's as simple and as clear as possible. But the last portion is where I find a lot of clients, fail, is they don't share and inform the entire organization or all the stakeholders. So it might be the entire organizational goal. But if you think about maybe like a system implementation or you're moving locations or something of the sorts, what's the specific, succinct goal for that project? And it just serves to align everyone in the same direction. And I'll just wrap this up with a quick example that I love sharing is if you think about the annual budgeting process, and say you're a technology company, and on one side of the table, you have your chief financial officer. On the other side, you've got your head of marketing or your head of sales. Depending on what your goals for the organization, it could be we want to double in size. Or we know that the market is contracting and we need to protect ourselves. By crystallizing what your goal is, that if you want to grow by 200%, it's much easier to get the chief financial officer to fund programs that'll support that growth, that'll align with what that sales or marketing leader is looking to achieve. But in the same respect, if you're looking to conserve and protect, it also gives means to have a conversation saying, we'd love to spend budget on that, but you know what? This is a year of contraction. We got to protect the organization. So getting very clear and simple and succinct just makes it so much easier for everyone to get much more aligned with their thinking.
So, in your opinion, as far as the firm of the future, how is that different from the traditional model in relation to, say, workforce transformation? Because obviously, there's going to be a lot of firms that are going to have to go through that transition. And what would be I don't know, maybe even asking the question from a different angle of what would be that process that they're going to have to walk through in order to get to that end goal of shift so that they can stay up with everything that's changing and be a little bit more agile.
Sure. I think the firm of the future, bottom line, a couple of words come to mind. Agility. I don't think we're in a period that's going to be well defined, that this was the period of change. Because of Moore's law and the speed of computing, because of factors like AI, because factors of being able to work remotely now, because we have these technologies, these types of evolutions are just going to continue. If you think about firms, and whether we're talking consulting firms or accounting firms or whatever type of professionals, we can talk about architectural, whoever, is that change is going to be ever constant. And so we need to acknowledge that. And looking to engage your teams and your employees. Part of the culture is not, this is how it was when I was your age. It's a combination of, yes, there's some knowledge that can be carried forward, but as we look at these technologies, as we look at these individuals who are representatives for us and our clients, getting that feedback and having a dialogue and being able to have a much more inclusive relationship in conversation about how to best serve them is going to best service the firm. Because if you're looking at it right now, the number of individuals and projects and revenue that your average partner manages as compared to, say, 10 or 20 years ago is significantly larger than it was. And the reason being is we're just more efficient. Yes, things cost more, but we're much more efficient. So we can charge based on the value for that.
Yeah.
So going on to that second point about value, it's incumbent upon firms to be able to really demonstrate their value for their clients. And whether that's acting as the trusted advisor for the C-level suite or helping those mid-level managers get to wherever they want to go with their careers. I think we need to be much more empathetic and build those relationships, which to what we just mentioned before is counter to a lot of the culture today.
Yeah.
And that people are sitting behind desks and Zooms and they're not reaching out and seeing how I can help you. And so as we look at the firm of the future, it's going to be the eyes and ears of our entire workforce because they are the leaders of the future. So the quicker that we can bring them into that mindset, that they're going to help contribute towards what that future of the firm will look like, only entices and actually retains them because they feel like they've got a piece of the pie. And that doesn't mean equity, but it's ideas and that they influence, they made a dent on something. For the firm of the future, it's going to be critical that we're agile. As my football coach used to say, head on a swivel. We're always looking at the horizon, seeing opportunities or things that can hurt us. But it's double downing in executive skills. And that to me, decision making is a quintessential piece of that. Because if we're not listening, if we're not collaborating, we're not making the right choices towards what our ultimate objective is, it's so easy to get misaligned. Because one of the things of the firms, as you know as well as I do, a lot of these firms are built basically as small businesses that they're all mashed together and they collaborate together because each partner has their own revenue bucket. And so more so than ever, we need to work together because you're going to have a technology partner that's going to work with the accounting or the M&A partner to put together a deal. And that is what's going to help them separate themselves from the pack and grow.
So what do you think has been your truth that's gotten you this far in your journey?
Hard work and just faith in myself. And I'm not going to sit here on a soapbox and saying that I get up every morning and saying I've got the confidence of King Kong. But it's a belief of a better self, a better life for my family, the better life for my friends and family, in who I want to be. And so I regularly check in with myself, my wife, who is obviously one of my closest confidants, and friends, in talking about where do we want to be in 3 or 5 or 10 years. But the other side of that is the reflection of who I am. There was a mindset that I had in my early 20s that I was going to take over the world. And I had dates set for when I was going to make my first $1 million. And I had dates set for when I was going to make partner. And I had all these dates set. Guess what? Reality happens.
Right.
And that's where there's a little humility that we gain with age. My
Yeah.
kids still say that I don't have my age, which I actually appreciate. But I think it's still having that creativity and not getting stuck in a rut. Because again, not beating the dead horse, but we're talking about COVID. There's so many people that have become complacent
Mm-hmm.
and they're just doing their job because that's what they do and they don't know what else they can do and it makes them enough money and it gets them by. You've got one life to live.
Yeah.
If you don't have passion, if you don't have joy, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, I'm not saying sell everything and move to another country, but make decisions for yourself. What is your goal? Who do you want to be? And even with my own kids, I said, if you become a struggling artist in Santa Barbara, California, but you can self-sustain your lifestyle and you're happy, go do that.
Yeah.
Don't take my goals and make them your goals.
Yeah.
And that's where with this is just focusing on what are your own personal goals and how do you want to get there and be the most authentic you can be. And it's amazing the amount of energy that produces because
Yeah.
people now realize that's Jack.
Yeah. And being around, I think, other go-getters is very inspiring. I think that as a marketer, it's easy for me to promote other people. Let's make you famous. I'm excited. And then all it takes is someone to say to me, Amy, you want to do a TED Talk? And I'm like, oh. And I think that having people around you that push you and challenge you too. Because if you're in an environment that you're stuck and you're just paying your bills and you're around all these people that are also stuck with no vision of anything else, it's really hard to get out of that.
You brought this up, and I fault myself for not. You're so right about inspiration around you. I've always been inspired. I've always gravitated towards those people that inspire me. It's who I am today. I came from basically small farm town, upstate New York. And here I am living a completely different life. But my most recent shift was I joined a community called Impact 11. And it's focused on folks that all they do is speak, which we always think about comedians and these types of professions where you always feel isolated and alone. That's speaking. And to hear the stories, to see them on stage and see the vulnerability that even your most successful people have is the most enlightening thing that you can have. Because we, again, today, far too often feel that the world is against us, or I can't succeed, or I can't. Who is really saying can't? I think most times when you say I can't, you're actually doing your own self limitations.
Yeah.
And when you see somebody who's been successful, that's inspired, but then is vulnerable enough to tell it you, they've been there. They've been curled up on a ball on the floor before speech, terrified about what they're about to do.
Yeah.
It's having those kind of people around you that will both show you the vulnerability, but also give you that strength to say, you know what? This is but a moment. Set that aside, go kill it, and let's go forward.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Having those inspirations are the best cheerleaders you can have.
I have one more question for you. If you were able to give yourself one piece of advice when you first started out on your journey, what would it be?
I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
One, patience. Patience. I was extremely impulsive. And if I didn't get a result by a particular deadline, I moved on. That's why I quit. I did an amazing job on this amazing interest rate derivatives trading desk for Morgan Stanley when I was 23, that I was living the life of Charlie or Riley. So patience. Trust the process, ask the right questions, make sure you stay focused on what your goal is.
Love that.
Second is with regards to your goal and not your financial goal. Who are you? I don't think many of us in our early 20s have the mind space to ask ourselves that hard question. Who are you? And I think when you really get clear on that, it really, many of your decisions that you have to make just become your next step forward, because this is who I am. That's what I'm going to be.
Yeah.
So,
I love
sorry,
that.
I cheated.
No, that's great. So Jack, if there are individuals that would love to work with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Absolutely. My website, thedecisionswitch.com, or you can email me at jack@thedecisionswitch.com. I'm sure Amy will provide you some social media contacts, but hit me up either way. Would love to talk to you.
Perfect. I'll put all your links down below. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. If you're listening, you want more information about this podcast and upcoming shows, you can visit acalltothrive.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week.